and we'll get started. Um, Hello and welcome everyone. Um, this is our final tech talk for this program year, and we will be talking about ChatGPT and also just AI in general a little bit. Um, so my name is Rachel Barron, and I'm here with Sue Wilt,
Hi,
and
everyone.
we are both with the DLDE, the Digital Literacy and Distance Education Project. So I'm going to start just by going over the agenda. So we're going to open with a couple caveats, and then we'll talk a little bit about ChatGPT, branch out to see some other AI programs. We will have a little demonstration so you can see how it works if you haven't used it already. We'll be talking about some drawbacks to AI and then also some ways to make use of AI for yourself and with your students. And this is going to be fairly informal. So if you have questions, feel free to stick them in the chat or unmute. This is a conversation, which leads into our next slide. Which is that we are not experts and AI technology is moving fast. I don't know if anybody from the tech team is on this, but we had to change some of the slides even since we got them back since we first planned this. All right. Yes, and feel free to communicate via chat or microphone, whatever is easiest for you. And there should be the option to turn on the captions if that makes things easier for you as well. All right, so let's get started. So what is ChatGPT? Obviously, the first place to start is to ask ChatGPT what it is. So this is an example of a conversation that I had. I'm the R. So I asked ChatGPT, what is ChatGPT? And it says ChatGPT is a large language model developed by OpenAI. It is trained on a data set of conversational text and is able to generate human-like responses to various prompts. It can be used for various natural language processing tasks such as language translation, text summarization, and dialogue generation. So one of the things that's useful to remember when you're using ChatGPT is that follow-up prompts can really change the results you get. So here I asked it to explain that again using non-technical language. And you can see it immediately goes a lot less formal, starting with sure. ChatGPT is a computer program that can understand and respond to human language, much like how a human might respond to a text message or a chat. It can answer questions, have a conversation, or even write a story. It's called GPT because it uses a certain type of computer science called deep learning to learn how to respond to people. It's like a robot that can talk and understand language. So computer scientists and people who specialize in artificial intelligence have been working on these different language models for a long time. This is why when you write an email, sometimes it finishes words or phrases for you, or if like the autocorrect things in your text messages, and all of this is all based in this sort of language studies that computer scientists and other scientists have been doing based in the artificial intelligence field. ChatGPT is the first thing that was released to the public that operated at this level. And it's much more advanced than most of the things that were available to the public before. So next, here ChatGPT mentioned deep learning, and so Sue's going to talk to us a little bit about that.
Right. Okay. So what do we really mean by deep learning? Well, ChatGPT has access to all this data, not just from internet sources. Up until recently, it was sources really that were no newer than what September 2021 is what I read, but that's changing. But other kind of research articles. So the first part of the graphic shows there's all this data for ChatGPT to pull from, and then when you enter into the exchange with ChatGPT, you're asking a question, or what is the type of information you want from ChatGPT. Well, then there are different algorithms applied that produce your results. So if you're not familiar with algorithms, if you go to the next slide, Rachel, I asked GPT to explain what is an algorithm. And initially, it gave me a very formal definition with 7 parts. And I thought, okay, but can you explain this with a 6th grade reading level? And because I thought that was a much more practical approach. And as you can see, it says that algorithms are like a set of rules that help me, meaning ChatGPT, to summarize information. They help me understand the text and find important details. Algorithms also decide which sentences are most important and compress the information to make it shorter. They make sure the summary is easy to read and sounds right. And the algorithms can also be personalized to fit individual needs. They're very important for generating accurate and concise summaries. Okay, so there's these rules that take place to help produce the results. Well, who is it that's behind these rules? How were they determined? Well, this is what ChatGPT told me. Algorithms are typically written by software engineers, data scientists, or researchers with expertise in the field of machine learning and natural language processing. These professionals design and develop the algorithms based on specific requirements and objectives. They utilize their knowledge of programming languages, mathematical concepts, and problem-solving techniques to create algorithms that can effectively process and summarize information. Additionally, algorithm development often involves collaboration and contributions from a team of experts working together to refine and optimize the algorithms for various applications. So behind all of this is actually human interface that really help produce. I mean, not on your individual, there's not, as I type a question, there's some human person waiting there to develop the algorithms. They're what is embedded within ChatGPT to give us these results. So let's go on now. I think, Rachel, you're going to take over about what's the big deal? What's all the what's all the chatter?
Yeah. So why is this in the news? And I pulled a small sampling of the headlines that you can find that refer to either ChatGPT or to AI in general. All of these are from mid to late May. And you'll see that it's everything from, there are a lot of different places where artificial intelligence is affecting our lives or could affect our lives, and a lot of predictions about what will happen. And so one of the reasons that this is important is that artificial intelligence has been involved in our lives already, as I mentioned, with things like, completing our sentences, or if you use your face to unlock your phone, or any of these things are all artificial intelligence. But now all of a sudden people are realizing that it's everywhere, and that it's a lot more powerful than I think people expected it to be at this time. And so one of the other things that's kind of a big deal is that it's not just ChatGPT. So when I first was planning this talk, I was like, oh, we'll talk about ChatGPT. And then even over the past month, this use of AI has really spread, has become there are a lot more tools that have announced that either there are AI tools available or they are working on it. So if you think about, tools that you use just in your teaching, things like Khan Academy, Padlet, Quizlet, even Zoom is working on some AI integrations. So this is definitely going to affect all of us. And at some point, it's going to be hard, I think, to not choose to use artificial intelligence. So it's good to know just sort of what it can do and what some of the issues are with it. So that's why I wanted to have this conversation.
And to follow up on what Rachel just said, if you think about it, when calculators first came on the scene, oh no, this is terrible. No one's going to know how to do math. Well, yeah, that has really happened. Mental math has sort of taken gone in the background, but still there are great advancements that came about because of the calculator. The internet did replace the encyclopedias that I remember having at, in my family's house. Cell phones and other social media has come on board and become everyday part of our lives. So it's a matter of looking at the positives that can come from this, but still understand the risk or the disadvantage. And so we're hoping this brings about out an awareness for you of how you can actually use AI effectively in your teaching.
And so this is where I want to hear from you, because I'm curious what people are already doing, what you have tried, and what were the results? Were you impressed? Were you underwhelmed? Were you frightened? So if you have tried using AI to generate text or images, I'd love to hear a little bit about what you tried and how it went.
Hi, Rachel. It's Kim Gavlik.
Hey.
I'm super, super excited about this. I know a lot of people are really freaked out, but I think it's going to really change the way we do our work in adult ed. I just played around a little bit when there was the free beta version that you could do online, and I tried a couple, like, create a basic beginning ESL lesson for adults. And within seconds, I had step by step what to do, materials that you could use. I mean, obviously it's not going to be fully aligned to the CCRS or anything like that. But I even tried to do that. It tried, but it wasn't quite it wasn't quite there yet. But I really think it's going to be exciting for, especially, like, I mean, I'm an administrator. I always have to bring in new staff. So I think, something like this would really kind of help onboarding, grading things, that a new instructor or maybe a tutor could use very quickly. Helping students in our classes. I haven't done this yet, but I really would like to have it be some kind of way for us to integrate it in the writing process. So I'll stop talking because I could go on all day. But that's, I think it's going to be really exciting, and I really thought it was super cut down on time. Like, I think that's what it's going to really do, like cut down on time for us.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the advantages, is that it's very fast. Vicki, I see you have your hand raised.
Hi, yes, I just used it 2 days ago for the first time, and I am an ESL teacher, so I used it to create a dialogue when we were working on climate change and put in the vocabulary. It did a really good job. I was thinking, oh my gosh, I didn't have to make this one up this time. It worked out very well. I was thinking, okay, I'll be using this a lot.
Yeah, and that's a nice example of something that's like very concrete, where it's like, here's a dialogue and you can read it and exactly, like, tell it which vocabulary to use and everything. That's nice. It's easy to fine tune it for your class.
Right.
So I see a few things in the chat. Becky says they've used it to fill in the blank or close exercises for fill in the blank or close exercises in the topic and tense you're studying, using specific vocab words, dictations. Would have taken me an hour. Yep. In theory, so Jillian says, in theory, it could be really useful in finding a song to use that employs specific vocabulary and or grammar targets. In practice, the YouTube links it produced never worked, but fingers crossed for the future. And so this is where we're getting into some of the different AI engines, because if what you're looking for are active internet links, you might actually want to try Bing or Bard instead, and we'll talk about that if you want. But ChatGPT is not actively connected to the internet, but Microsoft Bing has a chat feature now that is connected to the internet. And Google also has Bard, which is connected to the internet, so they can give you live links. But yeah, that's definitely a drawback of ChatGPT, is it will happily produce things that look like links that aren't actually real. And then Becky said, I did have to keep bringing the grade level down. Yeah, which, you know, and as you learn to use it, you can sort of put that into your initial prompt. But one thing that I found really interesting with ChatGPT is just how it changes. If you follow up and you say, oh, this is too advanced, make it simpler.
Rachel, some of the things that I've used it for, this was even on a personal level. I have a granddaughter who's in Algebra 2, and she needed some help. And I honestly didn't remember about finding roots with quadratic equations or imaginary numbers. And was like, oh, I need a refresher. So I actually put her problem into ChatGPT, and it was a very detailed solution. And then I could explain it to her so that we could go forward with other problems. So it was a lifesaver in that respect. And you can also ask ChatGPT to translate things into different languages, which again, I can't say that I knew if it was 100% correct, but it was certainly better than anything I could have done on my own.
Yeah. Morgan, go ahead.
Okay, so I've used AI tools, a variety of different things. So one of the things that I find really helpful is YouTube videos that are really long. You can use a Chrome extension called Note GPT, and it will summarize the YouTube video. Now you do have to have both the Chat GPT account and then this Chrome extension, Note GPT, and then it will summarize your YouTube video. So I really like that tool because it's a time saver. I've used Chat GPT personally for if I'm writing something and I have like a writer's block. Sometimes I'll use it for almost like a phrase thesaurus, because if you're using like thesaurus.com, usually it will give you just like one word, but sometimes I need a couple phrases to work with. And so I'll use it in that sense. The other thing that I've been playing around with is using ChatGPT as a tool for possibly using it with the ESL learners, because there is a way to create a prompt to get a dialogue going with ChatGPT that will actually correct your grammar as you're going along. So
nice.
For someone who English is not their first language and they're trying to improve that, you can actually get a dialogue going on with that. Now I'm still playing with that because really the importance there is getting the prompt correct in order to ensure that it's doing exactly what you want it to do. But you can actually have ChatGPT ask questions to the English learner, and then they can respond, and then have ChatGPT then correct the grammar.
That's really useful, and that's not something that I have played around with before. So that definitely sounds helpful. When you were talking about writing, I think I should probably disclose that I used ChatGPT to write the first draft of the announcement about this webinar, because I was also having a little bit of writer's block. And I can see sometimes I like have an idea and then I want help putting it into professional language, and that could also be a good use for that. All right. So do we have to cite it? Ooh, Becky, that is a wonderful question. I would not assume that people are citing it. I think in certain circumstances people are, but depending on how they're using it. So like if you use it for brainstorming or for a first draft, like sometimes people like, I didn't put, brainstorm with Chat GPT there on the announcement. In more academic settings, I've definitely seen a little bit more of that, or on websites that are specifically about artificial intelligence. I've seen like this content created by Chat GPT.
I think one of the big things with citations is to realize that I asked, I forget the question I asked Chat GPT. So what are your citations? Where are you getting this information from? And it cannot produce the actual sources. So
No.
from an academic standpoint,
Thank you, Sue. That's just what I was thinking of. How do we know that it's even accurate information?
Well, it even goes on to tell you it can give you misleading information, because you got to understand, if it's pulling from data sources, like not everything on the internet is true, right? So it's pulling from those sources too. So I think the important thing to realize is it could be a launch pad for you for pieces of information. Then you have to find other, maybe it's an incorrect word, but I'll use it, legitimate source to cite, because Chat GPT cannot cite its sources. So if it gave me a fact and I was writing a paper on something, I would look someplace else that supported that fact that Chat GPT initially gave me.
And that's actually, I've actually seen, I haven't had a chance to use this myself because I've been teaching math lately, but I've seen ideas for writing activities with students where they'll have Chat GPT create something, and then part of their assignment is to go back and fact check it or evaluate it. If you ask it to produce citations, it will make stuff up. It will make up citations. It'll find like plausible authors and create plausible titles and stick them together. It's really very creative that way.
Now, Chrissy just sent a link. Chrissy, do you want to talk about the link that you just put in chat?
There's a publisher out there that sends like monthly emails with free resources, and that was one that I got recently. That was the first time I saw Chat GPT cited, and that's like a professional publisher. So that one, the way it's worded is that it was done with assistance. So to everyone's point, what part of it was Chat GPT? What part of it was a human? Where did Chat GPT get the information from? But honestly, before that, when they sent things, it didn't say where they got it. They didn't say if it was a professional that worked for their publishing company that made it. I mean, they don't always have authors on all their stuff anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And as people are saying, I asked it, like, who won the World Series, of 2022, and it comes back that September 2021 is the latest. Now that's changing with the connection with Bing, but so you have to realize it doesn't necessarily give you the most current information. And yeah, I just think this is an area where you use it with caution. Don't let it be the end all of any research. That's very important to whatever your task is. Yeah.
Morgan just made the point. Chat GPT discloses it has limited knowledge of the world and events after 2021. So that's something to consider. And Sean has a point about using Bing. Bing does provide links to sources, but you still should verify that There have been a couple times where I've followed a link that Bing gave me and it was not exactly what I expected it to be. And then Bethany looks like this is a link to the APA blog on how to cite ChatGPT. So if you are working in APA style, that is out there for you already.
And it would be interesting to see if at the, you know, at the like collegiate level, if they're even accepting this as a legitimate source.
I think it is highly variable.
Yeah, I agree.
Oh gosh. So there was an article in the New York Times where a law firm filed a brief using ChatGPT with made up legal references. Yeah, so especially if you're an attorney, you may want to fact check your work. So let's give this a try. Because I know not everybody here may have used this. I have the free account for ChatGPT. I have not taken the dive to upgrade yet, but I thought we could do something together here. So I'm going to ask it, somebody stick your favorite CCRS standard in the chat here. And we'll ask it to create an activity for adult students to practice. What's a good standard? No one? Okay. Let's say reading anchor 1, because we'll just try it. Oh, and now I can share a link to this chat in case I want to link to it. So this is a lot of information here. The thing that amazes me every time is how fast this happens. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to do this live. So we have to practice CCRS reading skills 1 by analyzing news articles and identifying main ideas, supporting details and implicit information, lists the materials needed. I'm not going to go into great detail here. We have an introduction, article selection. Looks like students are going to read and annotate their articles, have a group discussion, whole class sharing, reflection and summary, extension activity, wrap up and discussion. So one thing that I sometimes have done once ChatGPT creates something like this is then to ask it for some follow-up information. So like, what supports could I prepare for English language learners? And so, you know, a variety of things here. Pre-teaching the vocabulary, simplifying the text, sentence starters, sentence frames, and 10 different things you can do to support English language learners in this activity. I have noticed that if you don't tell the ChatGPT how many things to put in a list, it's often going to give you 10 things, which to me is a little overwhelming, but yeah. Anybody have anything else they want to ask ChatGPT?
explain how you find a common denominator for fractions.
All right, I'm going to start a new chat. Oh, and they're going to give us an example too here. So there you go. If I was a textbook publisher, this is where I would really start to get some gray hair. But yeah. So for those of you who haven't seen it before, those are some things you can do with ChatGPT. We've already talked about some of the drawbacks here, but I really wanted to make sure that we focused on this a little bit. The first thing here is hallucinations. That's what they call it when the AI makes stuff up. So when you say, where is your source for this information? And it says, oh, John Smith wrote an article called How to Use ChatGPT in 1972. And you're like, no, John Smith did not do that. That is a hallucination. And one of the problems with AI is that it can be very convincing. So ChatGPT always sounds authoritative. You know, Bing and Bard will have all these links in their responses that make it look like they've gotten this information from reliable sources. But it's really important if it's important that a fact is accurate, then someone needs to check it. I don't think this is a huge problem in the adult education field because there's not a lot of grading that happens. But in other education environments, cheating is a real issue because students can basically generate entire essays this way. And, you know, not cite their source. Bias. So if you think about the model that Sue shared earlier, ChatGPT uses all this data that was fed into it. And because the world is not perfect, a lot of that data is biased. And there's also sometimes bias in the algorithms, whether or not people intended for it to be there. So what I have on the slide is I use the I can't draw tool in Padlet, which is AI image generation. And I just asked for a picture of construction workers. And, at first glance, you may notice that some of these people have slightly odd proportions. Their reflective vests are very creative. But what else do you notice about these construction workers?
They're all men.
They're all men.
Now, do we know if these are images that it found on the internet and brought back? So there's somebody else's images?
This is AI generated.
It actually created these from scratch. Okay,
yes.
That's what
and these are all white men. A couple people pointed that out. And administrative professionals. Can you explain what you mean, Susan? But yeah, basically when AI generates images, they're looking for what things on the internet have been tagged as construction workers. Oh, they don't have specific tools. So they're not like laying bricks. They're not driving a backhoe. A lot of them are just sort of standing around talking. I like the low riding pants. Yes. So this is the kind of issue that you run into is that if you want to avoid some of the bias that has been prevalent in our culture, you have to actively work against it. And even then, it's not perfect. I was doing a similar search for like images of firefighters and tried adding different kind of race and gender into the description. And frankly, some of the results I got were troubling. So if you would like, I could share that document, but it was really actually pretty depressing. And some other drawbacks with AI is that sometimes the products end up feeling really generic. So if you ask it to write an article about something, it's not going to have a lot of personality because it's an AI. You can either use prompting or edit it yourself to make it feel less generic, but a lot of the time it just feels very, sort of formulaic because it's created by algorithms.
And if you happen to ask for an opinion, it'll tell you it does not have opinions or feelings.
Yes. There's a learning curve. So even with ChatGPT, like there are people now already who are posting like how to get ChatGPT to do what you want, the best kind of prompts to put in ChatGPT, what you should do to get the best results. So it's not like, it's not always super obvious how to get the best thing out of these products. And the image generators I find are particularly problematic this way. Like, you really have to be very specific about what you want. Cost. So ChatGPT itself was released for free, but there's another version, ChatGPT 4, which is more advanced, and you have to pay to get that. And a lot of the other products that are going to be released, just like everything else, there might be a free version, but to really get the best, you're going to need to pay money. And so then we run into some issues of, some equity issues there. And also just that this is going to be a really powerful tool that is not necessarily available to everyone. And what happens when, you have multiple entities that are trying to, achieve a goal, and some of them have much better tools than others, right? Or multiple people where, maybe one person is able to pay for the AI tutor in Khan Academy and the other person cannot, right? And then we talked about citations. So that's also definitely an issue. I think we already talked about how you can use AI in your work, but but I see Morgan put something in the chat. You can ask ChatGPT to answer a question like a public figure would. For example, answer this question as if you were Oprah. That adds little personality, and also gets into some of the potential problems here too, where there are people, especially in the image side, there are artists who are really upset because their style has basically been co-opted by some of these image generators. And then Sean says, I think Bing uses ChatGPT 4. Yes. And that's true. So if you use Bing, there is a limit to how much input and output you can do, I think, and how long the conversation can be, but it is using a version of GPT-4. And also, interestingly, the reason I use the Padlet I Can't Draw tool is because it's one of the few free image generators that is very intuitive to use. And it actually uses 2 image generators. I wrote to Padlet because I could not find this information anywhere. The top row of 3 is generated by DALL-E, D-A-L-L-E. And then the bottom row is Hatch, which is something that I'm not very familiar with. So Vicky said they just looked at the cost of the app, ChatGPT Plus is $20 a month. Yeah, that could be prohibitive. And Susan says, as this platform unfolds in the classroom by students, will the research show that while it adapts to the level of proficiency of the student using it, will the student remain at that level, becoming a purgatory of sorts? Do you think it will evaluate to move the text to the next level? I think that there's still a space for instructors there.
Mhm.
And I would hope that as the instructor, you're sort of evaluating, you know, when I give students readings at the 6th grade level, is that still pushing them enough? Are they still developing their skills, or do I need to give them something that's harder? And this is where something like an AI tutor like Khan Academy is working on is going to, I would hope, be evaluating that information as well, but I wouldn't trust it completely yet at this point, or maybe ever. Yeah, a hybrid approach. And actually, so one of the things that I've heard, so I watched a webinar that was from the Office of Educational Technology at the federal level, and that's really what they are promoting is a hybrid approach. They're saying they do not want to take the teacher out of the educational process, but there are things that artificial intelligence can do that will allow more individualization for students and will allow teachers to spend their time differently. But, you know, the hope is that the human stays involved in the process. The human, I think they say the human should be in the loop. So you should know what your students are seeing. You should know why they're seeing it and if it's helping them. And certainly at this point. And so as AI sort of comes into the classroom, we need to be talking to our students about it, especially if you're using it with them. Because there's a lot of opportunities here. So students could use it for brainstorming and getting summaries, starting a project, getting feedback on their writing. You can copy an essay and stick it in, and you know, you could potentially even then give it the GED essay rubric and say, what score would this get and why? It's actually a good language opportunity for students to learn to be specific when they're prompting the AI to be using that language, to be fact checking, or as someone mentioned earlier, translating things. So if they're having trouble understanding something, they could translate into their first language. Obviously, students should also know about some of the misuses. I put deep fakes here, and we were, you know, I was just talking to some other people about making, like, you know, modules. It's to the point now where if you are willing to pay, you can basically create a script, give it to a program, they will put it into whatever voice you choose, and then you can play it over anything. And so people are starting to just beginning to be able to make videos where it's like, oh, that's Rachel Barron saying this thing, but it's not actually something that I've ever said. Basically putting words into people's mouths. And you can imagine when you start thinking about presidents and CEOs and how this could be problematic, right? We already talked about not using AI as a sole source. You should always be fact checking your information and be looking at other sources of information. and not just trusting the information that it gives you. So
Rachel, have you
Yeah.
ever taken a paragraph and asked it to go to a higher reading level? You know, we talk about, well, okay, as I did with what is an algorithm, okay, now put it at the 6th grade reading level, put something that you think is very simply stated and say, increase the, you know, the difficulty. I just wonder if, what it actually does.
I haven't done that as such, but if you want to, so you could, for instance, if you're writing, oh, sorry.
Did it call?
Hello? All right. So if you're writing something, so write an email telling someone they messed up. So now it's putting it in professional language for me here, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is a lot of words to say that someone messed up. So this might also be a drawback because this is really verbose here.
That's the punishment for messing up. You're forced to read these long and you never find out what you messed up on because is it specific? We didn't tell it what the error was. So
Right, I know.
everybody, that'd be great. Supervisors are always looking for ways to give feedback, but it's still not going to work.
Yeah, so it did make it a little bit shorter here. But addressing recent concerns and urging improvement is our subject line here. So yeah, I mean, you can, and then like, translate this into Spanish. And there you go. So for your international countries, your multi-international conglomerates, you can tell your colleagues all over the world that they messed up. Has anybody used AI with students so far? If you do, please let me know. I'm very curious how it goes. Oh, to help write resumes.
That's a great one.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find it effective?
I think that's an instance where there's, yeah, to cut down on excess language. Yeah. And there's such a clear sort of convention around resumes that it really, I can see how that would be very helpful. Yeah.
Did it actually put it in an acceptable format, or was it just more of a narrative then that you had to choose to, you know, decide the formatting of your resume?
It formats it.
Mm.
Yeah. That's nice. And that's an example of where this could be sort of an equalizer. Yeah, generically.
Generically. Yeah.
I would be curious to see if you ask it to write a resume for a different field, if it can change that, because I know, like, depending on, you know, different industries have different conventions around resumes. Yeah.
I just tried something where we're right now looking at science for GED prep and the pros and cons of different scientific breakthroughs, including AI. And what I found is just because we can do things in science, should we? And I found that a lot of my students really didn't know what I meant. What are the debates? So I just did one with what are the pros and cons of GMOs, you know, so.
Mhm.
And I'm looking over it briefly, just as the glance, and it seems like it's giving me good examples from things I've also read about it from other resources. So, you know, maybe if as long as we're not doing deep research, it might at least give me the pros and cons for a debate, you know, that we could have.
Yeah. And something that I've also heard of people doing a lot would be to have, you know, ChatGPT write an essay like that, and then have the students go in and sort of, what would I change here? How could I make this more accurate? How could I like make this more interesting, or whatever? So Vicky just tried a resume for ESL instructor. All the lingo is there, and I would need to input my personal details in spaces provided. Ooh, so you got a really generic resume there that you can personalize, which is, I think that's a really good use of AI, is to give you the frame and then you fill in the details and add the meat, because then you're really also paying attention. You're going to catch mistakes that way as well.
When you showed the lesson plan, what I was looking at was what were the components of the lesson plan? And I didn't get to look at all of it, but do you feel like it's a well-designed approach to lesson planning, or is it direct instruction, or does it suggest, you know, does it use project-based learning? Do you think it's savvy enough to give at least a good set of steps for a new teacher to follow?
I'm sorry, the artificial intelligence in my computer keeps trying to move my window. No.
It's taken over.
So like if we look at this ELA lesson, and this, I didn't even ask for a lesson plan, I asked for an activity. So you could get a more formal lesson plan, I think, if you wanted. It looks like, you know, students are working fairly independently, and then they're having a group discussion. So it's not just, you know, it's certainly not lecture.
Yeah, I noticed the reflection and summary at the end, and an extension activity, and just it seemed to break it down in those components. So maybe it is already programmed to at least give you what a well-rounded activity might be. I just was very surprised that it included things like reflection, and seemed like as if it was knowledgeable of those things.
It does a really good job of seeming knowledgeable, doesn't it? And I keep, you know, there's a debate out there actually, is whether we should say that ChatGPT knows something or not. But yeah, so there's certainly something there where it has some good models for lesson plans that's not just like, you know, all direct instruction all the time, right?
Right, like it included group discussion.
Yeah.
It just the variety surprised me. And yet I thought, okay, so we could ask for a different kind of lesson activity and see if it uses the same, just like the resume, and knows the basic framework of a good resume.
Or something that I've messed around with in the past is like, okay, so, you know, make this into a, you know, 4-class long project, you know. There's a lot of things you can do at this point. Morgan says this is also a good tool for someone trying to enter a different field, such as what skills would I need to learn if I wanted to be a fill in the blank. This can be helpful for students with career planning. Yeah.
I also wonder if you took a response and later put it back in word for word, was this response generated from ChatGPT?
Funny you should ask that. I actually did. I'm not going to be able to find it right here because I have too many conversations. I did do that, and its first response, I just copied what it said, started a new conversation, pasted it into the box, and said, did you write this? And it said, no, you wrote that because it was in my text bubble. And then I said, does it seem like it was generated by an AI language model? And then it was like, oh yeah, this does seem like it was generated by an AI language model because of these things. And there are AI language detectors out there, but none of them are very reliable so far. Partly because the AI is it's changing so quickly. It can
I
also
asked at one point that if you ask the question another time, like same exact question, is it
Mhm.
possible you would get a different response? And it definitely said yes.
Oh
You
yeah,
could
and
get
in fact,
two different responses to the same question.
and there is even a regenerate response button. So if you don't
Right.
like what you get, you can regenerate the response and then you
Right.
get another one. Yeah. And then Morgan pointed out that it can create a 30-day learning plan. So can you write a 30-day plan for me to improve my English skills? I have intermediate English skills. Oh, this is where I want to go to I want to remind people that you can save the chat here. So if you go to your chat where it has the 3 little dots and hit save chat, because I'm about to put a bunch of resources in the chat. But also with all of these ideas, like these might be things you want to return to and try again later. So before we get to the resources, ChatGPT is like the MySpace of artificial intelligences. We'll look back at it and laugh at how powerful we thought it was. So just
Who
remember.
here is so young they don't know what MySpace is?
Yeah. Yeah. ChatGPT is like the first version of spell check where it had the little blue squiggly underlines, but then half the time it was wrong. And it didn't know the difference between there, and there. Yeah. So this is why, like, just like with MySpace, there will be people who come into this much later on when artificial intelligence is much more advanced. And there are people joining it now, and it's just sort of like, where do you want to be? Where do you want to start your learning curve? But yeah. So I'm going to put the links to all of these resources in the chat. These are some things that I found particularly interesting as I was doing this research. Some things that I found useful. They are mostly not doom and gloom, because I do think that we need to be thinking about how to use this rather than trying to pretend it doesn't exist. And yes, Nancy, if you send me an email, so my email is rbaron@tiu11.org. If you send me an email, I'm happy to send you all of these resources. And I can send you, I'll probably just send you the PowerPoint as long as you credit it, if you use any part of it again. So if you want to save the chat, it's at the bottom of your chat screen, like next to where the emojis are, there's 3 dots for more, and one of those options is to save the chat. But yeah. So if you have any questions, or if you want the PowerPoint slides or anything else, please speak up. I know it is 2 o'clock, so some people have to leave, but
I wouldn't mind having the PowerPoint slides just so I could share just a couple of points with the staff about this. Not that they've been really talking about it, but it'll come up, but yeah.
yeah, could you either put that in the chat or send me an email? If you put in the
Sure.
chat that you want the slides, I'm saving the chat myself. So put in the chat if you want the slides and I will, and the email that you want me to send it to, and I'll send it to you. I'm going to stop the recording.